And Avi, turn off your, oh no, you can't do that.
Microphone?
No, don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
Hi, and welcome everybody. Lashana Tova.
Matova.
Exactly. We're just waiting for folks to filter in, and then we'll start today's Sweet New Year Babka class with Avi Weizman of Kondita Heritage Baking. So I can see that we've got some participants coming through. I always love calling people out that I know. Hi, Anne. I see members of the J, lots of friends. Hi, Judy, Michelle, Rebecca, Rosalie, Trudy, Joan. Obviously, we're so happy that you're all joining us today. We've got probably about 50 participants that have RSVP'd, so we're going to hopefully get a few more folks to come through. And we'll start in just a couple of minutes. Hi, for those of you that are just coming in, we're going to get started in just a moment. Lashana Tova. We are waiting for everyone to join us for today's Babka, Sweet Holiday Babka cooking class for the holidays. Glad you all could join us. All right, we've got about half of the participants have come through. Welcome, welcome everybody. All right. So Avi, what are you cooking for Rosh Hashanah?
Oh, you know, it's a lot of the, well, we're mostly vegetarians at home, but I like to keep things sweet and festive. If I'm making any kind of like dish, I like to add like either pomegranate molasses or just pure pomegranate juice to it. Of course, everything's going to contain honey. A little sesame balance to it also. Just have fun with it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get started. So I just wanted to say hello and welcome. We have a great group of people who are joining us today. I'm Pamela Lavitt. I direct the Arts and Ideas programs, the Seattle Jewish Film Festival, CJAM Festival, and in normal times, all of these events are happening at the Strom JCC. So much of what we're doing right now is virtual, and it's been just so great to connect with the community as we're facing this incredible challenge in our lives for us to cook together, bring sweetness to this new year and whatever we can. So I'm so happy that I have Avi Weizman of Kondita Heritage Baking joining us. And before we have a nice conversation and we get everybody to the cooking, I just wanted to lay out some basics about today's class. It is part of a series of Rosh Hashanah events happening at the J. I'll show the slide again at the end. There's a candle lighting. There's lots of things going on. And the J is still a very vibrant and active place, while there still is a lot of virtual events happening, including Avi's cooking class today. So please go to SJCC.org and check out the many things that are happening virtually and otherwise at the JCC, and to learn more about what's happening for this holiday prep week. Before we begin, I wanted to just welcome everyone. The recipe is on our website, and if you don't have a copy of it, go ahead and download a copy before that web page goes away. You'll want to grab that. Avi has made me delicious babkas made of Nutella. Today we're going to work with a more Rosh Hashanah theme using walnuts and raisins and cinnamon and sugar, but his Nutella recipe, I'm not sure exactly where you can find it, but you'll have to DM him directly. They are just out of this world, amazing. I mean, amazing. So we're really pleased. Also, Avi is going to be cooking out of our kitchen at the J, which is incredible. Woohoo! So I feel like we have an in-house caterer all of a sudden, which is marvelous. And certainly those babkas and his rugula and his many sweet treats will be here at the J, hopefully in an ongoing basis. And please, please, please support him in what he's doing, because like many people in the bagel industry and others, catering industry, this has been a challenging time during COVID for people to, but food providers, you know, that's what we need. We need the delicious foods that make us happy. So I just want to say a couple things about Rosh Hashanah and about Babka, and then we'll get to a conversation with Avi about his story. And he has a wonderful story of family and how he came to do the work that he's doing. But what is interesting to me about Babka, for those of you that don't know, is that it is not the traditional dessert that one would think you would make for Rosh Hashanah, right? You think honey cake, and even within the sweetness of all the Jewish foods, the streusels, the other bready and delicious things, it's been kind of the sort of like stepchild of the Jewish food world. I believe that Avi will talk a little bit about some of the people that have put babka back on the map. First of all, Yotam Adolengi in Jerusalem made a chocolate babka that at that point, everybody just wanted to make babka. But there has been a recent uptick overall on food blogs like Feller and Nasher and others. And I'm sure that Avi can talk about some of his favorite chefs that write about Jewish food on Instagram especially. But I think it's really amazing that babka has become sort of an iconic new holiday dessert. So today we're going to be learning a little bit about how to make it, learning a little bit about the history, and maybe we could just start with that intro, Avi, and if you could tell us, I understand that the word babka itself comes from the word bubi, like in Ukrainian. I know it's part of a cake that was, you know, a Christmas cake, basically. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you know about why is it called babka and what is babka? It's a yeast cake, correct?
It's a yeast cake for sure, but it has very strong Jewish origins, whether it was done in the large cities of Europe or the shtetls, where someone's bubi made a cake that was basically filled with anything. It could have been cinnamon raisin, it could have been chocolate, it could have been poppy, which is very common that I would even see in Israel. And that's called a Crayons Cake, or ugat shmalim, as they call it in Israel. And I only discovered babka when I grew up in Los Angeles, as I was born in Israel. And you know, babka was usually a very dry, not even crusty, bagged dessert, and it wasn't anything great, but it was ultimately, you know, and quintessentially Jewish. And I used to always see it in the delis. I used to see it in my favorite bagel shop. But it wasn't quite like my mom would make it. My mom's was much more dense, cake-like. Sometimes she would make a version that was even more fluffy. But I hope you like mine, that you'll see that it's a little more, I guess, a little more up on the scale, that it has a lot of stretch, very much of a brioche type of dough. A rich brioche is how I always describe it to people.
Yeah. So one of the things I was wondering about babka is that it's kind of like the bagel, right? It's like, can you get one in Seattle that's decent? And we finally have many delicious bagel makers. So perhaps you're setting a new trend. And I just want to let all of you know, I don't know if you already prepared your dough or not. You can watch, you can listen. We're going to have lots of kibitzing and conversation going on. Please submit your questions in the Q&A. But if you did make your dough already, great. We will get to that section, and Avi's going to take us through that in a minute. Or if you have not, you can make that with Avi as well. So please make sure you get everything out if you're not ready to do that. This is supposed to be an interactive class, or it can be a cooking show. But the question of the babka, and I understand that, you know, you grew up in a family of Moroccan Jews, and largely those were the foods of your family. So here you are making the penultimate Ashkenazic, buttered, brioche-like dough of chocolate that comes from a Polish or Ukrainian or German Eastern European backdrop. So what's the story of you and your family and how you came to Babka?
So growing up in Los Angeles, I can vouch that it was at the time majority Ashkenaz. And my father had a kosher restaurant for almost 30 years on Pico Boulevard, if any of you know where that is. Very Jewish area, lots of shops, restaurants. And he had a restaurant there, and he started out just doing grilled fish and salads, and you know, introduced people to an Israeli cuisine that they didn't know before. But he also knew that he had to kind of adapt to the different palates and cuisines that were Jewish, but there were many different kinds of Jewish. So he was able to accommodate anybody that came to him. We were actually right next door to a Chabad house where, you know, he got requests for kugel and knishes and kishke and cholent, definitely not his kind of cholent, but which the Moroccans spice a lot. And whatever people asked, he made. And he brought some of that stuff home, including things like blintzes and babka. So that's how I got introduced to it, for sure.
So you're a man who has many cookbooks. How many cookbooks do you own?
Last time I counted, it was about 98. I'm almost to that 100 point. And it's not just for cooking; it's also for reference. So we and reading. I'm just a big lover of food as long as I can remember.
But I loved when I asked you who your favorite chef or cook was, and what did you tell me?
On the top of the list would be Yotam Ottolenghi, Jacques Pepin, Melissa Clark is amazing, from the New York Times, if you know her, who has actually made an amazing babka. And she introduced that not much after Yotam Ottolenghi did, when he wrote a piece for The Guardian or the New York Times, I can't remember.
Well, yeah. I recall that the first thing out of your mouth was actually your father. So I just want you to know that that was such a reverent,
he's the top chef.
He's your top chef. There you go. So on the mantle of this, can you just walk us through, give us a little bit of an overview of how we're going to approach cooking today, and we can get started. And I would ask if you would go ahead and tell us about what are the things that are on the table right now, any tricks of the trade that we need to know to get started.
Well, one of the tricks of the trade here in babka, or really any baking, is you want to have everything prepped out. Everything you saw on the recipe, as you can see here, I put in many different containers. I even went as far as for the filling, the butter. It's room temperature, of course, but I wanted to make sure it's really soft and spreadable. So I just took a fork and whipped it together. I actually had honey also today that I added, and I just want to make it more Rosh Hashanah for you. So with the addition of the sugar and cinnamon, we'll add in dollops of honey.
Excellent. So looking at your recipe, you know, making the dough, electric mixers, you've got the KitchenAid. Just tell us a little bit about how important is it to have some of those tools of the trade? Can your hand and your arm really do the work of making a fine enough dough? And what does one need in terms of those kind of utensils and things like that? You even mentioned a thermometer for the inside of your challah that everyone should have. So what are some...
Oh, I'm a big believer in having all the right tools in the kitchen. You might get a little overwhelmed or have your other half fight with you about the amount of equipment you've collected over the years. But these tools are just so important if you bake regularly. It's just so vital to have in your kitchen. There are just certain tools that, you know, a good grater, a good microplane zester is wonderful to have, which I always use, of course, for the lemon zest in this babka and around the house. I even use it for garlic all the time when I'm cooking. But the thermometer piece that you were mentioning that is really important for me as far as knowing that one, I'm cooking safely, and two, that I'm actually cooking things to the temperature that they need to be in order to be eaten and get the consistency that you want. For example, a babka, yeasted dough, sweet dough, and a challah really needs to be at 200 degrees when it's ultimately at its highest point. I always take the temperature about 5 minutes before I know that it's ready. And I'm looking for about 180, 185 range because I know that it's going to continue to cook and get to that 200 degrees. And I'm all about trying to make something foolproof, honestly.
So let's get started. As you're starting to mix things together, narrate a little bit for us about your recipe. What do you have on the table? And you said you prepared everything already out. So give us a little bit of a tour of what we have and what's going into the dough.
Absolutely. So of course we were going to start with our flour and yeast. So I use a scale. Some of you may not use a scale. And I like to measure everything in grams just for accuracy. But this recipe, of course, has cup measurements for you as well. And I, of course, have all my ingredients prepped here. The walnuts have been chopped. Milk is already at room temperature. It's been sitting here for a while, totally fine with whole milk. Nothing bad is going to happen to it. I always have my tub of dusting flour available for me. And of course, the certain tools, a good bench scraper as well as a spreader. I also use a bowl scraper if any of you these rubber thingamajigs to get the dough out, making sure you're not missing anything, especially if you have a really sticky dough. Babka dough is not overly sticky like some doughs. It has a good balance because, of course, the butter lets it be nice and lubricated throughout the bowl. Let's see. I already have I like to have my egg ready for brushing the babka before I'm going to put it in the oven as well. And that's pretty much it. Sorry, that's a timer I have going right now for babka I already made. So I'm just going to check that. I'm not going to reveal it to you just yet because that's part of the fun.
Right, this is a real cooking show, people. We've got things in the mix already ready to go. Because actually, babka would take how long? Like many of us who make challah on Friday nights, we've got a 5-hour rise and then we have another 2-hour rise. So the overall process of babka, how long does it actually take to get it right?
Well, to back up a little, yeast dough is actually very versatile. As far as the timing, that you can do a short rise or a long rise. Short rise meaning that it's in your kitchen or a warm space, that it can take about an hour, hour and a half on the first rise, and then do another rise for even as long as 2 hours, as long as it doubles in volume.
Gotcha.
But then in this case, I like to do it the way I learned was do it in the refrigerator. And that's, how did I say in the recipe, that it's a minimum of 6 hours, and but I choose to do it overnight. And sometimes it exceeds 8 hours and it's completely fine. It's a cold dough, so of course when you have cold doughs, you want to let them to get to sort of a room temperature. But again, I'm all about foolproofing things, so even if it's a cold dough, you roll it out thinly like the recipe says, and spread, put it together in your pan, and you can let that rise even up to 2.5 hours, and it will double in volume because you're allowing it to get to the optimum temperature for yeast.
Why don't you narrate us through as you start to put the dough together? We can continue the conversation going, and
absolutely
tell us what you're starting out with.
So I'm starting out with all-purpose flour, white, unbleached. And the thing is that you can have a choice of using all-purpose flour. You could use bread flour. You can use half and half. It's fine. I'm going to measure mine out, but I did also want to mention that when I don't have bread flour, I go ahead and use Vital Wheat Gluten. The Vital Wheat Gluten just really helps me out to get that gluten structure that I'm looking for. So the dough is even richer. Again, that rich brioche dough is what I'm going for. So now I'm going to measure our flour. And in mine, I have, I'm going for 500 grams on my scale.
You want to translate for those of us that that speak in ounces?
Cup. Yeah. Well, 4 cups, approximately just 4 leveled cups for 500 grams.
Great.
Yeah. And I'm right at 400 grams. And now with this Vital Wheat Gluten, I use a 1/3 cup measure really to give me the most even amount. And again, that's for that really wonderful, stretchy dough that we all love and know from challah and babka.
So I'm just curious, like as I've talked to, we did a series called Bagel Bites. For those of you that didn't see it, I'll put in the chat where you can watch it on our YouTube page. We interviewed about 6 bagel makers in the city, and flour was such a big controversial question, right? Where you source your flour from. I see you're using like a Bob's Red Mill. Yep. Is there a difference in the flour that one buys, and organic, not organic, whole wheat, unbleached? Tell us a little bit about how this affects your recipe.
Well, whole wheat, I've tried many times in making a challah that's all whole wheat, or even half spelt flour. And you definitely taste it. It's much sweeter. You taste the bran in the whole wheat. I tend to only use white unbleached flour. I typically use an organic, but today I'm using a conventional, like Bob's Red Mill flour, and that works really, really well.
What is the other one? Someone asked you. There are 2 packages there. What is the other one? This
one was the Vital Wheat Gluten that I was talking about, and that you can just add to any recipe that's with the 500 in 500 grams for 4 cups. I added a 1/3 cup of Vital Wheat Gluten. Now I'm going to add my my instant active dry yeast, and that's 2 teaspoons.
So I keep like a bag of active dry yeast from my challah in the fridge instead of using packets.
Absolutely.
Is it just like, will it live through the apocalypse? Or is it, those packets look so neat and everything, but when you make a lot, you know, getting packet after packet, it's nice to buy a whole huge thing of yeast and keep it in the refrigerator. Will it go bad?
It won't go bad. I think it can even stay in your refrigerator 6 months to a year. I usually, if I'm not using a big bag, I'll use the Fleischmann's or Red Star jar that they sell at the supermarket, and that just works out fine. I also tend to use fresh yeast that I really enjoy using, and I can tell the difference. There are areas of that I've heard both in the United States and Europe where dry yeast isn't even available. It's mostly just fresh yeast at the supermarket, and that really gives you a really different dough as far as its stretch, its how it reacts to temperature. But that of course doesn't live as long in the refrigerator. I believe it only has about a month less shelf life.
Got it. Yeah. So show us, you're using a special tool, which I wasn't really that familiar with. What is that?
This is my bench scraper. And like I said, it's really easy for me to scrape the dough, especially when I have wet doughs. But I really like to use it to mix anything, especially like dry flour like I'm doing right now, since I want to really incorporate the yeast with the flour and the Vital Wheat Gluten. So instead, some people love using their hands when they bake. Some people don't like to touch their food when they're cooking, and maybe it's kind of the same thing. And that spatula really helps. So you can fold with it, you can mix with it, and it's really wonderful. I make a focaccia at home that actually I've had requests for as well. It's super simple recipe too, and I just get my oven as hot as I can. Comes out beautiful, like you think I have a pizza oven or something. It's so delicious. And like I was mentioning, that some doughs are really, really wet. The focaccia dough is super, super wet. I mean, it's just yeast, flour, water, and just a bit of olive oil. So you're stirring just a very, very sticky dough. It will go everywhere. And I use this, and my hands hardly get dirty. So it's definitely an easy cleanup that I'm thanked for later.
As you're going on, a couple of people are throwing some things in the chat. I thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
So Michelle asked, should the yeast be dry? Should the dry yeast be warm, or is it okay to use it right out of the fridge?
Right out of the fridge is totally fine. The fact that you put it in the fridge is slowing down its reaction, so you're not having any risk of it going bad or dying. Just like there's the I guess ideology that people have. A lot of bakers have always said that you can't always put salt near yeast; it will kill it. I've put salt near yeast many times and nothing has happened, but I'll still always think of it every single time I do it, and I'll separate it off, put it on one side of the bowl.
So now that you have the dry ingredients in the bowl, you're mixing them up really nicely, not getting yet yourself like your hands in there, which a lot of people love to do.
Well, this is the yeast part. I really want to get the yeast crumbles completely incorporated in the flour, even in a way massaging them into the flour, so they really kind of start reacting and bonding to those flour and those carbohydrate molecules, sugars, and so forth.
Would you say that anything about your technique is different than others that make babka? Is this a unique way that you have decided to make it?
I'm not sure. I think it's pretty. I think it's a pretty wonderful. It's time consuming, but it's a really easy, wonderful recipe that anybody who loves to bake can do. Get the kids involved, and it can be really fun.
Yeah.
But technique-wise, no, I don't think so. I mean, you do it once, you do it twice, and that's it. It sticks.
So
I'm going to add the rest of the dry ingredients. I have sugar and salt. Because at this point, when I'm making the recipe, this is when it can start all going into the mixer bowl. And you can add everything in there. The flour, you can always mix first and then add everything else. So I'm going to do my milk.
have you made babka yet with alternative milks? I know this is not exactly the gluten-free recipe, obviously, but what about alternative milks with cooking, oat milks or almond milks or anything like that? And obviously this is butter. If you observe on Shabbat, is it ruin your babka to think about alternatives?
Well, the butter I haven't tried, even though challah I always make with olive oil or a light olive oil. I try, so it's not too strong. You want something neutral with challah. But again, the milk in this case, because it's a brioche style dough, that's original to the recipe, the milk and the butter. But if someone wanted to make it, with an alternative milk or without the butter, I think they should take a try. You won't know until you try. So the butter obviously can be substituted for like the oil that I use in a challah, and I would try macadamia milk, soy milk. Could be oat milk can be a good alternative as well. Something that has good amount of fat in it that you can tell it's creamy. Coconut milk may work as well.
Got it. All right, so let's get this dough on the road.
Yeah. Now I'm going to do my lemon zest. We're only going to do a half lemon.
So, and while you're doing this, I also wondered, you know, there's been, I understand at the beginning of COVID, like you couldn't even get yeast at all in the stores. There was a run on yeast. People have turned towards some comfort foods, and there's this crazy sourdough starter fad that's going on. I don't know if there's, I'm wondering, my daughters have started putting a sourdough starter that they created in their pancakes and in everything. And I don't exactly understand what the big deal is. Where does Babka live in the starter world, or have you tried it at all with any kind of alternative?
As a sourdough starter, I had not tried it in a babka. I just think it would change the flavor much.
Yeah.
But I'm like a lot of people that around, you know, I remember around March, first week of April even, I was struggling so much to find yeast to dough. Any yeast. Flour was really difficult. It was all very difficult to find. I mean, that was the best conversation starter with some of my chef friends, and on Facebook and other social media platforms. Like, did you find? Can I borrow some? You know, and I was of course on the hunt for fresh yeast, and that was just going from store to store. I was hitting every supermarket. We had some of them that I've never even been to, as long as I've lived here in the Pacific Northwest. And, you know, just peeking even inside the dairy, you know, where only employees are allowed. I'm like, hey, can you sneak me something? But no, that it was just, they weren't getting anything in. So I had to put on hold my baking. So you can imagine how I felt.
Well, I know I'm distracting you from the cooking part, so don't let me distract you, because I'm going to continue to pepper you with some questions. But I wanted to, while you're maneuvering, and if you need to make noise with the KitchenAid, let us know.
So I'm gonna start mixing everything in here. As the recipe says, we're gonna add just a little bit of butter to the first initial mix, since we want everything to gather, but it just needs a little bit of fat. So I only added 2 tablespoons of butter to it. And I'm just gonna put my KitchenAid on low, or even to the semi-low, number 2, and just get everything going.
So while we're waiting for this to go, Avi, since we were talking a little bit about your baking during COVID, maybe you can tell us all just a little bit about you and your story. And you were actually a chef cooking in town, and in addition to doing some catering, but things shifted for you during COVID, and now Babka is part of your lifeblood in the community. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey as well?
That's right. Yeah, COVID really hit home for me, someone who worked in the restaurant industry for many years. And it was a very, you know, hard realization that I wasn't going to be able to go back to work, and what the new normal that was going to be my profession. So I wasn't exactly excited about staying at home and not doing anything. So if I was going to stay at home, I'm going to start baking. I'm going to do something. And what started it all was that we have a not the biggest Israeli community in Seattle, and they had immediate interest because they wanted the taste of home. And since I was making, you know, different desserts like tiramisu, tres leche cake, arugula they went crazy for, but it turned out that babka and arugula were my biggest sellers. And now we're going on 6 months with COVID since I left the restaurant, and this is all I've been doing. People have just been really giving me the response I hoped for. I just never thought I was going to get. So the dough at this point has come together. So that's when I'm going to start adding in the butter in tablespoons gradually.
So we can't see it, but when you say coming together, what do you mean? And then I have a question also from Michelle about lemon zest. Does it add flavor, or does it used to create some kind of acidic reaction with the milk? What does the lemon zest do? And then how do you know the dough is ready to add more butter?
I want to say the lemon zest is kind of like how you think of chocolate or cake that salt is added to it. It gives a flavor balance. And the way I always learned, just like, yeah, it's pretty common in Israeli yeasted cake recipes. Lemon zest is essential. You just cannot not have it. You can't have one with the other. And it really just changes things. You can try having no lemon zest, and you'll about be able to see it, taste it. So now that I've added all the butter, it's starting to really get sticky and almost coming away from the bowl. So you can really see that the dough will start working for you, coming into a ball. If you have any issues with the dough, let's say being too wet, you can add a little flour to it. I'm actually going to add a little bit to mine. Little by little. And this is the point when I also like to set my timer for 3 minutes to really have the dough just do its work, get all those gluten strands come to really, really stretch and get more immaculate.
So as I'm looking at your recipe, as I'm seeing, I know that after you make the dough, you have to, proof it. And so what exactly does that mean? What is proofing? Where does that come from? Do you know?
Proofing simply comes from whether you're making your own yeast through a starter, or buying fresh or active dry yeast, and that just allows the yeast to do its magic.
And sometimes I've noticed, like when I'm making challah, that sometimes it's a little too dry or it's a little too, so what is I noticed that there's no, like, unlike challah, which is very different in its consistency, what about water and liquids? Like, can you add more or less, or is that just ruin the babka and its balance? It's a very exacting measurements, or is it like grandma's kitchen where you throw a shtickle of this and a little bit of that in for taste?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that is, for me, happening when I follow the recipe, but I'm watching the dough as it continues to work in the KitchenAid, and I can see whether it needs a little more dryness, it needs a little more wetness, and you can do it teaspoon by teaspoon, pouring just a little bit from your liquid measuring cup, and you make it happen. It's really a trial and error kind of thing. As far as having too dry of a challah, as far as the end result, that can be over baking, over proofing, under proofing, and so on.
Got it.
Yeah.
So one person asked in the chat about the consistency of your babka and the one that we're making today in particular, the flakiness or, the heaviness. Where's yours on that scale, and what tips the scale to a heavier babka? And I can say personally, from having tried your babka and grown up on a lot of babka in New York, that yours is actually quite light and fluffy, but by nature it is a bit of a heavier, doughier existence. So where is your recipe in the light to heavy, and why have you decided to make it like that?
Again, I had experienced in growing up just a very dry, crusty babka. I don't even know if I'd call it crusty. It was just bad. But this babka definitely has a lot of stretch. It can even be gooey, and you can see all the layers, which I love. I don't do necessarily a like croissanto, that you have many layers and you're constantly folding. But this dough kind of works itself because of the way we roll it and then we cut it, so you'll see the layers that we have, almost similar to like someone making a cinnamon bun.
Mm.
Yeah.
And do you know anything like from the theory? Obviously, there's streusels and other things, but the corkscrew that you're going to demonstrate as the second part of this, is there something about the shape of the babka, the technique of the babka that it's so different than anything else in the baking world that I've seen?
Say again, I didn't quite hear you.
Corkscrew, the techniques that you're going to teach us shortly afterwards, are those unique to babka? Have you baked anything else with that as a technique?
No, that's a good question. I've actually never worked with any dough that it was just the corkscrew. I mean, challah, you do the braid and you can do any number of strands. Some people are really talented in something more than 3 strands, which is usually what I stick to. But the corkscrew is really unique to babka, I would say. And it's just always, it gives just the right amount of layers. It's kind of like a marble cake, a croissant, a cinnamon bun, all rolled into one.
Got it.
Yeah. So I lifted my mixer here, and the dough just pretty much fell away. It's worked its way enough, and that's how you know that your dough is ready. It's not too wet, not too dry. That's what I like to go for. And again, I have the bench scraper, so I can just use that, the bowl scraper, excuse me, and just be able to.
Can you tilt it a little bit to your left so those of us
Sure.
at this camera, tilt the whole bowl so we can look inside for a moment. Yeah. See how, there we go. A little higher. Yeah, there we go. We can see just sort of how moist and smooth that is. Thank you.
And I always feel in this recipe, it's not necessarily moist from the milk, but more from the butter. If I touch it with my hand, where is it? Right there. There's no dough on my fingers because I'm just, that's the butter working for sure. The loveliness of butter. So I'm just bringing it out from the sides and from the bottom. I want it to be totally loose. Just so it kind of comes together as a ball in the bowl. And I can.
Amazing.
And now I just cover it, and about an hour, I say, to bring the dough to about 50% rise, halfway through, not doubled. And we let that rest for an hour, okay?
Yeah.
So that is our first stage.
So I just read a little tidbit about the babka. Obviously, that some have said that in the Encyclopedia of Jewish Food, they said that in the 19th century in Poland, a lot of women, obviously religious folks, pull off a piece of your challah anyhow, but that they stored some of that bread and then they used the same challah to put jam and chocolate and things into it. So I did not know that. Maybe it's folklore, maybe it's not, but it was an interesting piece of folklore on the origins of the babka story.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about what happens now. So we're at a stopping point. Most of us in your recipe, and many people that are here have not necessarily downloaded it yet. So you need to let it sit, your dough, for an hour in the regular refrigerator, covered? No,
it stays out at on your countertop, room temp, warm place even, to let it rise. About rising, I also wanted to mention to one of my techniques, if I'm kind of tight on time or if it's a cold day, I like to take a pie plate and I boil some water, and I put the water in that pie plate and put it on the bottom rack of the oven, so I can use my oven as a proofer. There's some special proofing boxes that people can get, but your oven can work fine for that. And you can, by just the steam that's in that pie plate, creates that perfect warm environment, usually around anywhere between 68 and 72 degrees.
Got it. So
I'm going to grab the dough now from the refrigerator
right,
that I already allowed to rise overnight.
great. So just want to remind folks that, you know, you're already asking some questions. I'm curious to know, anyone who is part of today's class has actually made babka. What do you like to put in your babka? People, you could just throw some stuff in the chat and let us know if you're somebody who's made rugala. Is it a similar dough? Is it a different dough? And then just love hearing from all of you as to what made you show up today. And if you're going to plan on making some babka, obviously go and get the recipe. There was one question about Canadian flour being higher gluten level. And so maybe, do you know then if you should use the wheat gluten?
Well, if that sounds, if Canadian flour is kind of like how I think about it in England, for instance, you have just flour, and then you have what's called strong flour. That's usually more of the bread flour. There has been more protein added to the flour in the milling process. So that's the main difference. But if all all-purpose flour just has more gluten in it, more proteins that have been added, then that's wonderful. I would just use that and not add the vital wheat gluten. So that's a really good question.
Tell us the next steps. Yeah.
I had made the recipe, of course, and it went through the full proofing in the refrigerator overnight. And this was in a ball, and I cut it into two because, you know, this recipe does make you two babkas. So for time's sake, we will roll out just one and make the babka. So I'm just going to lightly dust flour on my workbench.
Avi, where do you get wheat gluten? Joan wondered.
Wheat gluten is usually found, I mean, more supermarkets have it now, but, and the Bob's Red Mill one is usually the one, or the first one I ever bought. It comes kind of in a small yay-high package. And otherwise, your specialty store like Whole Foods and yeah, they would have it.
Interesting. So like obviously what I love about this being a very family friendly recipe also is that there's no knives involved, right?
No knives involved. Well, you might chop your walnuts for this recipe with a knife, but you can have it pre-chopped, or I take my saucepan or skillet in a Ziploc bag and I just bang it, or with a mallet.
And so how friendly, and what are the parts that are most kid friendly? Is it like, I bought my kids mini rolling pins when they were really young. So somebody asked, an anonymous attendee said, can my daughter help make babka? How hard is this? And for what age do you think they can participate?
I think it's, first time I started baking was 5 years old, I want to say. So maybe a 5-year-old can do it. I think so. So definitely put the kids to work to this stage as well, because you need to roll to get the dough as thin as possible, so then we can spread, because I know they love the spreading part, but this could really use their help as well.
So we have a lovely teacher here at the JCC who every Friday, if you want to, makes her award-winning challah recipe. She won our challah bake-off a couple of years ago. So she often freezes the dough and sends you home with frozen dough. Can babka be frozen, and at what stage can you actually freeze either the dough or the actual babka, is a question that came into the Q&A.
I think it can be done right at the stage when you plan to take it out of the fridge before rolling it. It can go into the freezer. You don't even have to punch it down to let any air out. You want to keep it at that dormant stage and then allow it to defrost.
Mm. And so what's your favorite? I know you're making today the cinnamon and raisin and walnut, but when I've only had your babka in the past, it's been the chocolate babka. What's the percentage of people that go for the chocolate, and are you also making the cinnamon raisin? What's on the, what are you finding people are clamoring for?
Who doesn't love Nutella? I love the Nutella. That is delicious. But from time to time, I'll get a request for this one. Recently, I think it was right after Passover, I got a request for a halva that was out of this world. That's grinding up walnuts, tahini, a little bit of actual halva to it as well. And then the halva, in addition, gets just spread on the dough itself now at this stage that we're going to do, like we are the walnuts and the cinnamon.
Wow.
Yeah, really good. Someone also asked me for the cinnamon walnut, but they wanted it more sticky. So I kind of took the same concept as like sticky buns, if you've had those before. And it's, you know, incorporating more brown sugar and just more sugar, more butter, and making a caramel out of it, and actually setting a bit of that caramel sauce on the bottom of the pan to coat it, and then put the babka on top, turn it over, and then you have a nice, beautiful, sticky babka.
So even with like a rolling pin, I struggle sometimes. Like, how I notice you're not getting, there's no pieces of dough at all coming off your rolling pin. There's got to be a trick or a tip or a technique to what you're doing.
I found that with the babka dough, it's really the butter and the fact that it's cold, with that we set it overnight in the refrigerator. It really comes away. And this is a steel table. Some people will use a wooden or marble, granite, and it should work the same. And it's it's the cold and the butter. Really, that's what it is. I definitely don't use as much flour as when I'll roll rugula or something else, pastry.
So you put something into our potential talking points here, which I'm going to have to ask you to break open, which is people not being able to cook or bake. Is it that there's something intimidating about cooking or baking in particular, or maybe making babka?
I think it can be pretty intimidating. I mean, there's different factors to consider, you know, if it's about the equipment, if it's about how long you've been cooking, and if you haven't cooked at all and you just love someone else making it, that's fun too. I like that sometimes.
So yes, I know that there's like so many experimental types of you know, challahs you can make. I think I looked up the other day a turmeric and tahini challah on Nasher. How far have you experimented with your babkas?
Keep it pretty simple. Original recipes. That's what I'm about.
That's right.
I never even tried, like, you know, I see like green onion and garlic challah. Oh, you know what? No, that's not true. One day I had extra babka dough, and I made this wonderful little spread called piperade that I learned on a summer trip to Nice in the south of France. And it's a lot of onions and basil. And I just made that, and I incorporated it into the babka. It tasted like the best calzone or pizza you've ever had, but it was delicious. It was probably one of the best things I ever put in my mouth. So every babka can be done.
So Joan asked, is the dough you're rolling out cold, as you're saying, or room temperature, as you mentioned earlier?
It's actually pretty cold. I did take it out of the fridge, but we got to remember that the minute we start making it thinner and thinner and rolling it out, it's pretty thin at this point. It starts to get to that temperature, also reacting from the surface that you're rolling it on. And I did want to mention, I have been rolling and rolling and rolling. Sometimes in the middle, it will still be on the thick side, and you want it to be thin. And what you can do is sometimes lift your dough and kind of stretch it, just so you can get a little wider on your angle, whether it's becoming a circle or a square or a rectangular. Mine kind of looks like Australia right now. I don't know, but that's kind of that's how I always see it. So it's don't be afraid to stretch it. And if it tears, it's fine. It's getting filled and rolled. Nobody will see it.
Amazing. So how long do you think, how do you judge that it's 1/4 of an inch?
Say again?
How do you judge the thinness of it? I'm always making dough that's too thick.
I usually just put my finger and see the indentation of how far my finger has gone down to the work surface. And that's in the very, where you're seeing me put it in, very, very middle of the dough.
Got it.
So if I feel that it's too thick, I'll just try to raise it, stretch it up a bit, and then just keep on rolling so it keeps going to that. Now it looks like that part is done. We can start spreading our butter. Generously spread your butter. It is Rosh Hashanah, so we're going to be generous. So again, this butter is soft, room temp, and I even whipped it a bit with a fork and a bowl, because otherwise you can tear your dough.
I've noticed that like a galette, you've almost like left about, are you going edge to edge, or are you purposely keeping a 1/2 inch or so at the edges?
I am going edge to edge, trying to keep a border at the end, because I just want to prevent any kind of leaking. Or I have seen it where some people, like Nutella, they'll go ahead and spread it all the way to the edge, and they will prevent any leaking by spreading either chocolate chips, cookie crumbs, cake crumbs, all over it to kind of bring it together, so to prevent that leaking. I haven't had really any issues with it. So now, after the butter goes the cinnamon and sugar mix. And that, sure, I want to be generous. I want to really taste the cinnamon part of the babka. And really feel free. I mean, it's your take on if you like a lot of cinnamon in your babka or a little. You can definitely put more than what the recipe calls for.
So there's a question in here about, do you also spread the butter when you're making a chocolate babka?
No, I don't. If someone is looking for more what they call lamination, like with croissant dough or Danish dough, they will spread after the second rising. They will go ahead and spread it, fold it, and put it back. Let it rest again, I believe, and then roll it out again. So the butter is actually incorporated again in the dough.
Wow,
so the butter.
A lot of work.
Yeah. So now the walnuts.
How fine did you chop these walnuts?
There's some medium pieces, some small pieces, some really crumb pieces. Really doesn't matter. That's where I just want to give that variation on each bite of the babka. Same for, well, the raisins, unless you can only find large raisins, those should be chopped up. But these are just regular size Flame or Thompson raisins. And what's Rosh Hashanah without honey? So we're going to keep it nice and sweet for a sweet new year. And I'm going to dollop some honey. I even put it in the microwave just for 30 seconds just to get it to the consistency so it can be easier to dollop. As little or as much as you like. I'm just going to go for it. And now the rolling process starts.
Okay, you're definitely going to have to walk us through this very carefully because
Very carefully. Let's
this
start from the beginning.
to be the penultimate Babka moment here. So drum roll, please. This is how we do it, right?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to start from the bottom, closest to me, and I'm basically just pushing the dough gently, and it's kind of rolling itself. If you've ever made strudel, it also does the same thing. And that's just a very gentle, gentle push. Sometimes it needs a little more help. I usually have a very easy time when it's with the Nutella, but since there's more filling. Oh, and I did forget to tell you all that a little pressing to just hold the walnuts and raisins in place so they stick to the butter is a good idea. Didn't account for the honey to get all over my hand.
You're working, Avi, off of a stainless steel, kitchen table.
Yeah.
If you've ever worked with dough, it can start to stick to wood. What is the surface? How does the surface that you're cooking on make a difference in as the butter and the dough and all this is warming up a little bit? How do you keep from ruining it at this critical juncture?
Well, we have the big plus in this case is that our dough is been nice and chilled, so it's constantly reacting, and we haven't taken too long in rolling this out. I think for this time, so it's done a pretty good job on the steel. I haven't done it on wood, but I have done it on a stone surface, and it's worked just as good. So now that we have it rolled, you want the seam down and really tuck everything in, press a bit so we know that we're all closed up so we don't have too much spillage. And we can, using the bench scraper, I cut the babka right in half. And you'll be able to see immediately all those layers being revealed.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us what you're doing in this. What is this technique that's happening right now?
This technique here is the perfect way to create your corkscrew babka style dough the way it should look. And all I did was create an X. And I'm just going to start looping it just like a corkscrew.
Can you take all those raisins
and tucking the ends?
Will you shove all those raisins and nuts back in there, or just let them go?
No, I would definitely don't waste them.
Okay.
You can put it. You can do it at the end. You can do it now. It really doesn't matter. If anything spills out, just top it. It'll be wonderful. And that honey is sticky all over my hands, of course. I sprayed here my pan. I tend to use a 1.5 pound loaf pan, not the regular loaf pans that you see at the store. It just really allows for the babka to really grow, and a big babka in the end. So I've already sprayed it with a nonstick spray. You can also use parchment paper if you like, and just gently put that right in to your loaf pan. And all we'll do now, and these leftovers, yeah, they can go in there. It's all going to come together. Yes. And cover that for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and it should double in volume.
So again, for this one, do you put it in the fridge, or do you keep it at room temperature?
Leave it, room temperature, just covered. That's all. And I usually just use a kitchen towel. By all means, you can use plastic wrap, but kitchen towel does me just fine. Again, remember what I said about the hot water in a pie plate in the oven? That works like a charm, especially on a cold day.
Amazing.
Yeah. And for time's sake, all we're going to do is, after it's risen, we're going to brush it with just an egg wash, no water, no cream added to it. It's just eggs, just like you would do a challah. And that goes into a 350-degree oven for 30 minutes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. So while the magic happens, where the big reveal will happen in just a moment, let me just ask you a little bit, Avi, about how you came to Seattle and how you came to the JCC.
The JCC was a wonderful discovery because I was pretty new to the Pacific Northwest, and I was starting to, need a little more oomph in my life to cook and bake and be a little more involved with the community. And I had met a J member who cooked here already, and he was doing some events, and he actually never met anyone that was as passionate as he was about food. And that immediately connected us, and we hit it off when he told me that Yotam Ottolenghi was going to be at the Strong Jewish Community Center, and we are going to create a buffet for the people who come over for the book signing of, it wasn't Jerusalem, remind me what it was?
Well, we've had Yotam twice, so I believe it was either for Sweet, where he came with Helen Go.
Sweet is what it was.
And then he was here last year with Simple.
Yeah, so he and Helen Go, his co-writer on Sweet, were here, and you had an amazing discussion panel with him. But just before the event, we had a full buffet with about, I want to say, almost 10 items straight from the cookbook, from his other cookbooks, plus from Sweet, and that was such an honor to do. And we got to meet Yotam and take pictures with him, and he was quite impressed with our food because there was nothing changed from his cookbook. I wouldn't do that.
Well, I think, it's really an indication, one, of unlike a lot of cookbooks, he's managed to create a diversity of avenues for people to enter into Israeli cooking. Obviously, I always like to tell people that Goodies up on Aurora is a great place if you don't know where to find, nettles or nigella seeds or things like that. It's always good to find a good Middle Eastern restaurant, or in Bellevue, I know there's a number of places as well where you can get some of the items that are in his cookbooks. The J is always so proud to have so many Israeli chefs come through the door. And I'm going to put in the link while you are going to reveal your beautiful babka.
I'm just showing real quick how to make our simple syrup that will top off.
I didn't realize there was a simple syrup. Amazing. But I was going to say, I'm going to throw in the chat, Yotam Ottolenghi, I'm hoping that we'll have a virtual event to announce with him soon. But we are selling his cookbook. We're doing a pre-sale of Flavor, which is about to come out. So I'm going to throw that in the chat for everyone. If you want to purchase a copy, part of the proceeds support a local independent bookseller, our book sales partner, Island Books on Mercer Island, as well as the JCC. And there's a new film that's coming out about Ottolenghi. So hopefully if you follow us at the JCC or get on our mailing list, you'll learn more when we have some to announce about those upcoming events. So take a look in the chat. Avi, tell us what you're doing now.
So now I have the babka that I made earlier today. Just came out of the oven. And I don't know if you can see this, but just at the bottom of the rack, I do have the pie plate, and that's where I put it. I don't want it too close to the pan, but it's right at the very bottom. I thought I'd just show you that. If you want to show the babka, I'm going to just get some sugar.
I can't remember what you cooked for that Yotam event. What sweets did you make for that event? Do you remember?
I remember a crepe, layered crepes that were filled with honey, currants, ricotta cheese, and figs, because figs were right in season around Hanukkah, because that's when I think it was. And what else? I made these Australian oatmeal raisin cookies called Anzac Cookies that Helen Go is from Australia, so that was one of her big inspirations. And those put our American oatmeal raisin cookies to shame. They were so delicious. I believe there was one more I can't remember, but it was just such a fabulous event.
Yeah, also I'm throwing in the chat, we have a live recording of one of those events. I think it was for Simple, I'm not sure, but so Avi, you were at El Gaucho beforehand. You were a chef there. Were you just I don't mean to just, but were you a pastry chef? Were you doing other catering? And tell us a little bit about your catering for the holidays, because besides Babka, which is out of this world, an entry drug to your other catering, I'm sure, what other kinds of things are you making for the holidays? Because I'm going to throw up a PowerPoint at the end where you can learn more about ordering from your catering.
Sure.
Tell us what kind of foods you've been making for the holidays.
Well, for the holidays, I've been offering also like in Israel, we have many salads to choose from on the dining room table, whether it's Shabbat or holidays, beyond just hummus and pardon me, just different salads like tabbouleh, Israeli salad, which is a chopped vegetable salad. I'm making also my mother's matbucha, which is a kind of tomato jam with peppers. It cooks for about 4 hours. It's delicious. Really delicious, yeah.
I have a clarifying question that someone asked, which is, I love how she said, sorry to be so dense. I think you're making a pun on the babka. You're not. I think it's just the babka that's dense. But if you could clarify, if it's 500 grams of unbleached flour plus 1/3 of a cup of vital gluten, or 400 grams plus 1/3 of a cup?
No, absolutely 500 grams flour, just like the recipe, and then I add 1/3 of a cup of the vital wheat gluten.
So just to clear, it's 500 grams and 1/3 of a cup.
Yes, yes.
Great.
So this is my sugar syrup here. I only brought the sugar and water to a boil, added the honey for Rosh Hashanah. That was just a little extra for today. You want to let this get to not room temperature, but just warm. The babka here has already almost cooled completely. So we just want to brush it while the syrup is still warm, okay? And that gives just a wonderful shine and most importantly, keeps the babka really moist. That's really great, because babka can tend to dry out, as I experienced many times.
So this is your last step here, huh?
This is the last step.
Amazing.
Yes.
So Avi, are there any kind of parting words? And then I would love to show a fun clip that put Seinfeld's babka on the map, and then share some of your information. But is there anything else that you want to leave us with about Rosh Hashanah, about babka, about your burgeoning new business that those of us who are here today can share and take with us through the holidays?
Well, I couldn't be more thankful for the opportunities that I've been given, whether it's here through the J or, you know, COVID did give some opportunities to some, and really allowed people to see what I can do really well of my passions for cooking and baking. I just really want to thank the J for putting this on. This is a wonderful way for me to express myself, and also keep the J programs going for the holidays and into the future as we struggle in this new normal, but hopefully we'll be doing live classes soon.
Amazing. Well, I would second that. This is only the second cooking that we've done from our kitchen. Yeah. And I just want to thank so much John and the marketing team and the entire JCC for creating Rosh Hashanah programming and making this possible, because I have to say this 2 to 3 camera work is very impressive. It's amazing how the Zoom moment began and we were, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, but now I've got to have a screenshot with your babka and rugula behind me, and I need to have 3 cameras. And I hope all of you that are joining us today enjoy a sweet and happy new year, to be absolutely safe and healthy, especially given the airpocalypse going on. But what's better than a little bit of sweet humor for us to take us out? Oh my gosh, first of all, just look at the bottom of that babka.
It actually came out really gooey and sticky, and that's got to be the honey.
The gooey and sticky, even your Nutella chocolate ones are so gooey and sticky, and they actually last for quite a long time. So maybe we'll just get one final zoom in on your beautiful babka. And Avi, thank you so much for being part of the JCC. Now you're part of the JCC family. And with that, I'm going to share my screen. If John, you'll let me. I'm going to play everybody out and enjoy this. We're going to play a little bit of a clip from Seinfeld, a babka scene, and then I'd love to share Avi's information. So stay tuned for a couple of minutes. Thank you all for joining. Avi, give us a big wave off. Great job.
Thank you, everybody. Shana Tova. Have a very sweet new year.
And as we say, here's your moment of holiday zen.
You can't beat a babka. We had that babka. They're going to be heroes. Well, what are we going to do now? We can't get the babka. The whole thing's useless. Now, how about a carrot cake? Carrot cake? Why is that a cake? You don't make carrots into a cake. I'm sorry. Black forest? Black forest? Too scary. You're in the forest. Ooh. What about Napoleon? Napoleon? Who's he to have a cake? He was a ruthless warmonger. Might as well get a mango up. That was our babka. We heard that babka. What's this one? That? Cinnamon babka. Another babka? That was our babka.
All right. Well, I guess there is another babka. And so with that, I also just want to screen share and say thank you so much. Avi, you can learn more about Kondita, Heritage Baking. There's Avi with his beautiful rugula and all of his delicious desserts. And here is the website where you can learn more. Thank you, everybody. Shana Tova. Happy holidays. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Avi. Take care, everyone.
Okay.